So, I haven't made a video in about 3 months, mainly because I was busy being a college student. But I'm off for the Christmas break now, so it's time for me to get back to talking about movies on here. More specifically, I'm going to talk about my 10 favourite movies of 2022. As with last year, I'll be going by the Irish release calendar for this video, so you won't see movies like Tar or The Fabelmans because I don't get to see those until next year. Similarly, you will see some movies on the list that were released in 2021 in the US, but which I didn't get to see until 2022. As always, I've narrowed it down to a top 10, but first here are a few honourable mentions that I also thought were deserving of recognition. With that out of the way, let's get to the list. Park Chan-wook is one of the most well-known names in South Korean cinema, and his latest film, Decision to Leave, is a twisty and stylish thriller featuring a pair of gripping performances from Park Hae-il and Tang Wei. It's quite a slow burn of a film, and I will admit that I definitely felt the length during the second half when I saw it in the cinema, but I still found myself satisfied by how it all came together in the end, and my admiration for it has only grown since I watched it. On a craft level, this movie is stunning. It has some of the most striking production design and shot compositions of the entire year, as well as some of the most creative camera work and editing that I've seen in a while. The film has echoes of Vertigo in its blending of dark thriller with romantic tragedy, particularly in its haunting final scene, but really it's a Park film through and through. An Cailín Ciúin is an understated yet emotionally powerful Irish-language drama from Colin Boraid about a withdrawn young girl who experiences a loving home for the first time when she spends a summer with her distant relatives. This is the kind of film that manages to devastate you without being cloying or manipulative, relying instead on Boraid's sensitive direction and beautifully affecting performances from the entire cast. I'm not generally a patriotic person, but you'd better believe I will be championing this movie to get a Best International Feature Oscar nomination. Robert Eggers is fast becoming one of my favourite filmmakers working today, so naturally a Viking movie directed by him was always going to be one of my most anticipated titles of the year. And thankfully, The Northman delivered. On the surface, this movie seems to be a pretty standard historical revenge thriller, sort of like Gladiator but with Vikings, if you will. But really it's a deconstruction of that kind of movie, one where the protagonist's pursuit of vengeance is depicted as an empty quest born out of pride and toxic masculinity that only serves to destroy the lives of everyone around him and even denies him the opportunity to move on himself. The Lighthouse remains my favourite Eggers film, but The Northman proves that he is a singular voice who refuses to compromise even when he's working on a bigger budget, and that's something to cherish in today's filmmaking landscape. How does one describe SS Rajamouli's RRR? Well, it's an anti-colonialist historical epic that also blends the action movie, the bromance, the romantic comedy, and even the musical to create one of the most energizing cinematic spectacles of the year. I unfortunately didn't get to experience this movie in the cinema, but I still found myself punching the air and grinning like a madman while watching it at home, and I can only imagine how electrifying it must have been with a crowd. It's over the top in the absolute best way possible, but what really surprised me about this movie was how genuinely invested I got in the characters and their relationships. On top of that, this is a 3-hour movie that honestly doesn't feel its length at all because of how well-paced and propulsive the storytelling is. Even if you're not too familiar with Indian cinema, I would highly recommend checking out RRR. Okay, now we get to the first of 2 titles on the list that were released in 2021 in the US, but didn't come out in Ireland until this year. Licorice Pizza is probably the breeziest movie Paul Thomas Anderson has made in years, but it's no less brilliant than the likes of Phantom Thread, The Master, or There Will Be Blood. It's a sun-soaked hangout movie about 2 lonely souls searching for their place in this world, featuring a pair of star-making performances from Cooper Hoffman and Alana Haim, in addition to a roster of big names giving brief but memorable supporting turns, and an absolutely banging soundtrack. I get if you're uncomfortable about the age gap between the main characters, but personally I believe that their relationship transcends descriptors like friendship or romance. And also, movie protagonists do not have to be flawless paragons of human morality even if they aren't explicitly anti-heroes. Anyway, while I wouldn't call this a perfect movie, it's still a delightful and moving piece of cinema from a one-of-a-kind cinematic voice. The Worst Person in the World is by no means the first movie ever made about trying to navigate the tricky waters of adulthood, but it's one of the best in my mind. Despite what you might expect based on the title, the protagonist of this movie is by no means an unlikable character. She's messy and confused and makes impulsive decisions that may seem drastic or illogical, but only because making your way in the world is a messy and confusing experience, and most of us second-guess ourselves constantly while trying to do it. This movie captures that feeling of guilt and imposter syndrome that comes with being a young person in the world today so profoundly, and in a way that's sometimes funny and sometimes absolutely wrenching. Renate Reinsve is incredibly winning in the lead role, and I really hope to see more of her going forward, because she has what it takes to be a star. And on a note unrelated to the quality of the movie, I actually saw this at a screening at the Dublin Film Festival back in March, and it was my first ever festival-going experience, so that was pretty epic.
Skjønner du liksom hva du i ferd med å gjøre nå? Skjønner du hva du ødelegger og...
Ja, selvfølgelig.
Nope is an interesting one because I was actually very mixed on it when I first saw it. Having loved both Get Out and Us on my first viewings of both of them, I found Jordan Peele's latest to be a conceptually interesting but messy and unsatisfying movie that I respected more so than liked. But a few weeks ago I gave it a second watch and my perspective on it completely changed. I found myself way more engaged by the characters, felt the different story threads flowed more cohesively together than I initially gave them credit for, and its exploration of humanity's arrogance and the lengths one will go for the sake of spectacle resonated with me much more. And even beyond that, the fact that an original genre-bending popcorn blockbuster that entertains while still offering food for thought can still be made in the modern studio system serves as a beacon of hope for the future of cinema in today's IP-dominated landscape. And it's one of the many reasons that I'm grateful for directors like Jordan Peele. I wasn't a fan of Martin McDonagh's previous film, 3 Billboards Outside Ebbing, Missouri, but I very much was a fan of his follow-up, The Banshees of Inisherin. This is simultaneously one of the funniest and saddest movies I saw in 2022, using the simple story of an abrupt falling out between two friends as a means of profoundly exploring themes like loneliness, depression, and the messiness of people, while still managing to wring plenty of big laughs in spite, and sometimes even because, of its unrelenting bleakness. Colin Farrell and Brendan Gleeson give the best performances of their respective careers, while Kerry Condon and Barry Keoghan stand out in the supporting cast with equally affecting work. As the characters in the movie would say, it's pretty feckin' brilliant.
Let's just call it quits.
We won't call it quits. We'll call it the start.
Aftersun is one of those films that may not seem particularly devastating in the moment, but it really sneaks up on you by the end to become one of the most quietly wrenching films I've seen in years. This is a film that truly trusts its audience, telling a deceptively powerful story through the eyes of a child that allows you to gradually piece together what's going on without spelling it out for you. Paul Mescal and Frankie Corio have incredible chemistry as the father-daughter duo at the story's centre, and director Charlotte Wells proves remarkably confident behind the camera in her first feature film. Perhaps the biggest compliment I can give this movie is that I will never hear Queen's Under Pressure again without feeling like my heart is getting ripped out of my chest. So thanks for that, Charlotte Wells. I will be sending you my therapy bills.
Be whoever you want to be. You have time.
It's everything everywhere all at once. I think everyone who knows me knew this was coming. Look, I'm on Twitter enough to know that this movie has the Rick and Morty curse, where parts of its fanbase have become so annoyingly toxic that it's not even fun to talk about anymore, but that doesn't diminish how much I love the movie. It's a dizzyingly original action, comedy, sci-fi, family drama that explores generational strife and the search for meaning in the face of a vast multiverse with delightful absurdity, as well as genuinely moving character work elevated by a perfect ensemble. This movie actually made me cry over a fucking rock with googly eyes and a Ratatouille parody with a raccoon. Plus, it manages to build one of the most heartbreakingly romantic lines of the year around laundry and taxes. That's how good it is. Also, I saw this movie like a week after Doctor Strange 2, and this movie delivers on the Multiverse of Madness promise so much better than that movie that it's not even funny. Being a film student, seeing a movie like this that's so unabashedly bonkers and original made on an indie budget is just insanely thrilling to me. And for that reason, I've been obsessed with this film since it came out. There's just no question that it's my favorite film of the year.
Don't let anything distract you from it.
So those are my 10 favourite movies of 2022. In the meantime, happy holidays, and here's to an exciting slate of new movies coming in 2023.